Hi, it's the first time being here. So this morning I actually had a nature journaling club program with my kids. Their ages 9 through 12. And for the first time, I had it be like 50-50, like 50 returners, and then 50% was all new kids. So how do you balance a class like that out? Because I felt like I had to go over the inner wormhole, like it reminds me, and the I wonders again. I have half that already knows that. So trying to keep them engaged while trying to instruct the new kids. So it ended up being fine, but I had that moment of like, oh my gosh, I'm spending this amount of time all over again while the other kids could be doing something new.
That's a really an excellent question. Oh, by the way, Ashley, I noticed your shoulder patch. Are you a first responder?
No, I work for Harris County in Texas. I work at a county park.
You're a county park interpreter. Well, thank you for doing that, and really good to have you with us. Welcome. So Ashley's question is, you've got a group and there's different levels of experience with nature journaling within it. And how do you handle that? Let's brainstorm on that a little bit. Has anybody in any of the programs that they have done run into that problem, and what has been your approach to handling it? By the way, if you see me kind of looking down, actually I'm gonna let Moomin Troll take over my daughter's hat here.
Great.
So if you, I'm not ignoring you when I'm looking down. I'm actually taking notes. So I think that let's play with this idea. And Kate,
Katya.
Katya. All right.
Okay, I taught kindergarten for a long time, and so you got kids who came in who knew a lot because their parents had worked with them, and you had kids who were brand new, kind of what you're dealing with. And something to do is allow the kids to peer tutor, because it helps reinforce what the kids who know something know. So you kind of give an overview, and then you allow the kids to help one another, and that reinforces the knowledge. And I know that one of the topics we've had is how to enforce your knowledge and how to reinforce your memory of things. Teaching it is another way to reinforce your memory. And it allows the newer kids to realize that it's approachable, because look, kids my age are doing the same thing. So.
That's a really good thought. That of all things that you can do to learn something, teaching it gives us the best retention. So that when we kind of look at, how much do you retain when you just sort of listen to somebody? How much do you retain when you're taking notes? How much do you retain when you're kind of actively involved doing a task? How much do you retain if you teach it? That the teaching is actually the best way to learn anything. So if we build into our teaching opportunities for other people to teach, that's a huge strategy. Love that thought. Other thoughts and ideas here. Amy.
I find that it's never a bad thing to go back to the basics, review a little bit. If I've only talked about it one time, then kids have only heard what I have to say one time, and they may have heard, 80% of it, and they've probably forgotten 50 to 80% of it. And so, the NWIRMO is definitely worth going over more than once with a group. And I love that idea about having the kids help teach it.
Yeah, Katya, it's not our first rodeo on this education thing here. So you're saying that reviewing fundamentals is good for everybody, and that that each time you'll probably get something slightly different out of it. So there isn't any harm in doing that. Is that what you found, Ashley, when you repeated material that you'd done before, that the people who were had been involved with it before kind of came along without problem seem to get into it?
So there are some kids who were willing to share. So I posted more as a question, like, well, what are some things that we can put in our journal? So that way they would share. So there's probably like one or two of them that were giving feedback and saying, you know, the date, the location, time, and then they got into the inner wormhole part. So that's how I try to get them involved. And then I had other kids who were just kind of quiet and, you know, just standing there.
Great.
Not really getting a response.
Okay. Melinda.
Hi. Thank you for the topic. I was actually just thinking about that this morning before we hopped on the call. And I work a lot with adults and families. And what I've done is, you know, people will come and sign up for a class and I don't know what their background is. And so I'll usually take a few moments in the first class just to kind of gauge their comfort level and their background. But what I also know is that most people have not been exposed to nature journaling the way that we are teaching it. Well, I'm assuming that we're all kind of teaching it similarly based on a lot of what Jack has put in his books about I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of using those 3 prompts to really be the foundation of how we nature journal. And I find that there are some people who come who kind of know nature journaling or maybe have done some nature journaling like on a free, Sunday class with me, and then they decide to jump into a course. And I'll, talk about these fundamentals. And the way that I frame it is, I think Amy had brought it up, that reviewing the fundamentals are really good for everyone, but also allowing the adults and parents to know that as grown-ups, we are always looking for something novel, right? Something new. We've already paid for this class, so I want something new. I want something new. I want something new more than this. But really, I come back to just learning about the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and words, pictures, and numbers doesn't make it accessible to us. So by practicing it and using it in different contexts, looking at a leaf and using these fundamentals, or looking at the landscape and using these fundamentals, a spider web, so that this can be fresh and exciting each time, but just to set them up so that they understand this is why we're going to keep coming back to I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. And it's not that I'm repeating and that this is, redoing, that you're not getting your money's worth, so to speak, but that is putting it in, integrating it into our practice. So the way that I look at what I've been teaching my students is we get all these great tools from Jack's books, from other teachers, Wild Wonder, so many different sources. But if we have all those tools and we have it in a toolbox and that toolbox is closed, we can't use them. But I want to help guide my students to put them on that tool belt. Right? So you know how the handyman and the workers have that belt around their waist, right? Those are the most used tools. And I want to help people get more tools on that tool belt where it's handy instead of in the box, shoved in the garage somewhere. So yeah, you might have been introduced to a lot of really great nature journaling tools, but if they're in your toolbox and not within reach, then you're not going to be able to use it. And the way that you make it useful in your tool belt is to be practicing it, is to come back to it, come back to the basics whenever you can. And maybe, this month it's like, oh, I'm going to try these 1-minute sketches, and that's what I've been doing, trying to put 1-minute sketches into as many of my pages as I can, because I want that to be like this, like automatic. It's like, hey, maybe I can do this or that. And I think that will help with, additionally, the fear of the blank page. Right? We don't know what to draw, but the more that we practice and the more tools that we have handy in our tool belt, then we can grab something, apply it to whatever phenomenon you're in front of, and start nature journaling. So I think that no matter where people's levels are, there's always something that they can get from what you're teaching. And so I would say, start with the fundamentals and knowing, I think I like what Ashley said, those people who already have taken your class, get them involved and say, hey, let's all kind of start to get together on the same page. What are some things we can put in the nature journal? Like, what's the first thing that we should include, or what questions can we ask, those kinds of things to get, get the juices flowing. And I'm really excited about getting, not just teaching people, but getting the group, the cohesion of the group, creating the community. So whatever you can do to draw all of those different peoples and different levels and make them feel comfortable, I think that is going to help. And like what Katja said, mixed age learning is awesome. I mean, I love working with mixed age groups because the older ones or more knowledgeable ones can hold the hand of another and, be this example that's closer in age, probably, right, to the new ones that are still learning. So in a number of ways, I think a mixed level group is amazing. And I get that all the time on my Sunday Nature Journal groups. And what I do is I always have a few minutes where I talk about the 3 prompts, the fundamentals, and then I dive into maybe a topic. And then at the end, before everyone goes to Nature Journal, I'll say, hey, anyone else is new, come stick around and I can help you get, started, or if you're stuck, come over and, we can talk a little bit. So that's what I've been doing to address a mixed group that I don't know who's going to show up each week. So hopefully some of those things are something that, you can apply in your, your teaching with nature journaling.
Yeah. And for anybody who's sketchnoting these workshops, Melinda just gave us the toolbox on the shelf versus the toolkit on your hips. You can't help but sketchnote that visual. I mean, that's just a sketchnoter's just present right there.
Right.
There's a lot that we've seen so far. I run into exactly the same problem in the San Francisco Bay Area each month when we could actually go outside and play with each other in a group. We had these Nature Journal Club meetups once a month. And there would maybe somewhere sort of average around 30, sometimes 60, sometimes 20 people showing up. Our first one was really unwieldy. We had over 200 people show up for the first one. And do you have the red, white, and seat? And that was that was logistically difficult. But there will be people of all sorts of different ages in those groups. So I use a lot of the same strategies that Melinda was talking about. There's just sort of a little bit of a routine to what we do. What I usually do is I will welcome everybody. I find that getting kind of people to start to interact with each other and to meet new people is one of my big goals, because if at your park site, if people are looking forward to seeing people in this Nature Journal community the next time you have a program, then they sort of feel like we're the core people, and there's accountability because they know other people, and like, I'm going to miss that other person, and they're going to miss me. So what we could do this before COVID. You'd have people go around and introduce themselves to strangers and talk to them. Now everybody's kind of off in their own little pods, but that used to be kind of part of my routine of the day. Is that when we would meet, everybody would meet a stranger. And I would also have, anybody who's new to this, raise your hands. And then I would encourage people to like really reach out to these people and be welcoming to them. And then I would explain that I'm at the start of the program here, I'm going to give just a little bit of structure or some ideas. And then we're going to go off, we're going to Nature Journal together. And if you are new to this, then what you can do is I encourage you can stick around if you want to kind of stick around with me, and I'll give you a little bit more scaffolding. Because sometimes when you're new to this, more structure and more scaffolding will really help you be successful with what you're doing. So let them know that is available if they want it. And then, I'll do, some little nature journaling skill to sort of start the day off. And that could be anything from how do you use binoculars to how do you record bird song, to if we are doing something and it's the middle of fall, what are some ways of kind of quickly getting notes about a leaf. Kind of how do you start a drawing of, if you're just going to find a leaf and you wanted to draw that. You know, show people like, is it okay to trace things? Like, yeah. And then you can draw on top of that, or you know, some sort of little skill that it. And I usually have a different thing as kind of a hook each time. I agree with what has been said a couple of times about the importance of reinforcing the critical skills. So when people are out with us, you're going to hear, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of kind of coming at you in a lot of different ways. You're also going to hear words, pictures, numbers coming at you in lots of different ways. And then in one of these areas, we're going to get probably a lot more kind of scaffolding and strategies that you can bring with you. This means that every time that people come, the program, there's some fundamental things that are similar, and there are new things that are dropping into it that they can add to what I used to think of as the toolbox, and I'm never going to associate it with the toolbox again. I like having the tool belt. Yeah, you can get exposed to ideas, but if they just sort of sit in the bottom of the box, then they're really not accessible to you. It's not something that you're going to use on a regular basis. Other thoughts and ideas about doing, one other thing before I jump up and sort of relinquish the floor again, is that for people who are new and it's their first time, it's also going to be really important for them to be seen and for you to connect with. If it's possible for you, the instructor, to, if your group is small enough, to go around and make some personal connections with the people who are new in your program. That is going to be, they'll feel a lot more connected. They're more likely to show up again. They're more likely to make this be something that they continue to do. And something that is, you know, something that you can do when you are, if you've got sort of a big mixed group and you don't know what their skill level is that you can have everybody sort of use their arm as a kind of, as an indicator of how true or false a statement is. And you can say something like, you know, and so if it's true, you are going to go like this. If it's false for you personally, your hand is lower. If you're somewhere in the middle, your hand is somewhere in the middle. So you are kind of a little dial, a little meter. And you can say a question like, you know, I am new to nature journaling, right? You could say, I prefer writing things over drawing things, and people can put their hand up at different levels. And you can kind of get a sense of kind of skill levels, kind of visually looking at a large group. And then if you see like there's a lot of people that, you know, aren't doing drawing things, you say like, you know, sometimes I can feel shy about sharing my work because I feel judged. And you'll sort of see, you know, people will kind of give you feedback. And then when they're doing this and they look around and they see a bunch of other people doing it, then automatically they're getting kind of camaraderie with the group, and there's getting connection because they see like, oh, we all have these things in common, and they can look around and you know, they're not the only one. And you, the instructor, are kind of getting more of a sense of the needs of the group. That's also kind of a useful strategy at the start of a program. Other thoughts and ideas. If you're just joining us, the topic today is you have a mixed group of people with different experience levels in your nature journaling program, or you don't really, you're kind of new to this group and you don't really know where they are, and you're trying to figure out what is going to be the most appropriate thing for these people so that they get something that is new, novel, and we reinforce their fundamentals.
Can I just add one thing related to what you just said, Jack? I've used the thumbs up and thumbs down and thumbs sideways. So if you're on screens, like that might be kind of hard, but like if you can see the, like this could do a sideways, right? And also I like doing it this way because then it doesn't make you feel like you're the only one, right? So if you say, who's new to nature journaling? And then you're kind of like looking around and afraid to raise your hand. But if everyone had, if it was a true default, I like this, like I am new to nature journaling, then everyone's going to have their thumb or hand up, but it's just going to look like a different shape. And so I think maybe it'll make everyone feel like everyone is answering and not just outing just the person who, you know, is yes or knowing that. I think it piggybacks to what we talked about a couple weeks ago about, you know, including everyone, right, and not making anyone feel like they're different, like they're standing out.
A variation on what Melinda said, because sometimes kids are like, everybody can see this, everybody can see that, because depending upon where you are, is I would have the kids hold their hand to their chest, and this was yes, no, but I would have them keep it close to their body so that kids who felt very shy would respond, and they would respond as they responded, not looking over at the kid, you know, behind. They're not looking at another child to see what their answer is. That kind of helped as well. And so you could do it that if you're new to nature journaling, you've got your fist. If you're kind of new, you one finger. If you're really experienced, then you hold hand. But that way the kids don't have to broadcast to everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, on Zoom, yeah, everybody sees.
Yeah, and that's similar to that strategy of, you know, when you ask a question, if people raise their hands, once they raise their hand, they're not thinking, they're not engaged with things anymore. If you ask a question and you come up with one idea, if people put up one finger, and then if there's a second idea on the same topic, they put up a second finger, this keeps people active. And so you're more student engagement. Other strategies for working with people with mixed experience levels. I would like to reinforce what a couple of people said about that doing the fundamentals again and hearing it again is really, really useful. If you notice, I've already said that. And so what I'm doing is I'm reinforcing that idea by saying it again. And when people hear the same idea again, then that idea, the first time there's a little bit of resistance to it. The second time you hear it, it feels a little bit more kind of plausible. The third time you hear this, people are starting to accept it, which is actually, interestingly enough, part of the strategy of deliberate misinformation campaigns, something which we now all know a lot about. That if you keep repeating the same things, people hear it enough, and after a while, we just start to assume that it's true. So this can be done with nefarious disinformation, but it's also for us as educators, a really useful strategy to know that the more that really key things kind of come around again, our brains are going to accept them more if we hear that several different times. So we can both recognize that as a strategy when it's being misused, but we also can intentionally use it. So if Ashley in her program, she's doing I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of, we did a Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of last week. It's a really high percentage thing. It's sort of the fundamental of everything that I do. And so if we get exposed to that again, that's great. That's great. Sometimes a little bit of a different twist, a little bit of a different, using different language in how you would do it, you know, or even just if the first time that you were introducing it, you had everybody looking at a feather and doing I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of, holding this feather in their hand, and the next time they do it, they're holding a leaf. Just because you've switched out the phenomenon, that's enough to make this a new and novel experience, and people will be getting a lot out of it. I find that strategy is really great, because then when people say, like, one of the big problems is people kind of get out with their journal, they open up their journal and they don't know what to do. But if they've already kind of looked at a phenomenon or an object and they did I Notice, I Wonder, It Reminds Me Of, what you do is you just say, great, now get those ideas down on paper. And you can use diagrams, you can use pictures, you can use words. let's just take a bunch of the things that you've already said and get those on paper. And I usually tell people, like, if words are your comfort zone, start there, right? And your journal can be lots of words, but you just want to intentionally start to include some diagrams, some maps, some pictures, some visual representations of things that you're seeing. And you also want to start to include some numbers. So is there anything about this that you can count, anything that you can measure? If your comfort zone is drawing pictures, your journal can be mostly pictures. But then just the same way, just be intentional about getting yourself to add in some labels, some written notes, write in some questions, and also get some numbers in there. So that kind of allows people to start where they are. I haven't been monitoring the chat, so folks, what I find is that, especially in this group, people will put really cool thoughts and ideas into the chat, but then the chat doesn't get recorded in the video, and so nobody heard your really cool idea. So if anybody has any kind of comments that ended up going into the chat solo, I want to encourage you also, you might first kind of put it in there and when the idea hits you, but then when you see an opportunity, let's share that in the conversation as well, so that both people who are watching this later on the recording and people like me who are dyslexic and have a hard time reading the chat get to take full advantage of your ideas and thoughts. Again, our topic for today is wrangling groups with different levels of experience. Maybe another way that we could think about this is, how can you encourage mentorship in your group? Kind of taking Katya's idea of, we want people to be teaching each other. What can we do to encourage participants in our group to kind of come forward and mentor other people? And what does good mentorship look like?
Mm-hmm. Frequently, the best thing is to start by modeling. Almost everything that you teach in a classroom, modeling works best.
So when you're modeling mentorship, what do you want them to see you doing?
Well, you start with the fact that you've mentored the group that's going to do the mentoring, but you kind of take the child aside or take the children aside, however, and you demonstrate what it is you want them to do. Because I find that, especially with 5-year-olds, a lot of times they think that mentoring means, or modeling, or mentoring or modeling means that I do it for you, which of course doesn't help. But so I usually show them, and I might take my nature journal and you know, just looking, what do you see? I might ask some questions. What do you see? What do you think you might want to put in your journal? And I'll ask questions. And I find that modeling the whole idea of questioning the other person, modeling the idea of I wonder, frequently gets them thinking. But it's holding the expectation, because what you found that as the teacher, you're not just opening their heads and pouring in information, you're facilitating them accessing the information.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Hey, Jack, could you make me co-host for a moment here?
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to do that when you popped on the call, and then I forgot.
Thank
You
you.
are now a co-host. Hi, co-host. So while Melinda is bringing something up, sort of this kind of reminds me of sort of a related strategy, and that is to give you know, very often if you ask students a question, you know, everybody kind of panics and shuts down, and the kids who are always the gunners will pop their hands up, right? But if you give students an opportunity to do something on their own, to think about it a little bit, to write that down, and then with a partner to pair with that person and share their information with that person. In that little sharing environment, what you're doing is you're teaching that other person about kind of what was kind of your experience, and you're looking at the other person's journal for strategies that you could use. So one way of framing this might be to, you know, everybody's out at the pond and we're looking at the same phenomenon, and then you get together with a socially distanced buddy, and you are able to look at their journal and how they recorded information about what they saw. They're going to look at what you did. You're going to figure out what you each did that was different, and use those as kind of ideas of like, oh, that's something I could incorporate into my own journal. Then when you get back to a large group situation, you can ask questions like, did anybody see strategies in their partner's journal that you thought were really, really useful that other people could benefit from? And so there, it's sort of the formula is to think, pair, and share. And then when you are kind of get to that share place, they already have had a chance to do stuff on their own, to interact with other people. There's also less pressure on them to have to be the genius. And also in a lot of cultures, the idea of showing off is not cool at all. So being, you know, kind of actually there are in some cultures, jacking your hand up, and it's considered rude because you don't want to sort of show up in more sort of collectivist societies. You don't want to show everybody else up. So, but if you are shining a light on somebody else, then, you know, you are being a team player, you're being generous. Like, you know, I saw that in Andrea's journal, she had this, you know, she did use this strategy, thought that was really cool, and wanted to share that with everybody. So that would be one way of getting people to learn and interact with each other, learn from each other's journals, and also to then share that, you know, with the community in a way that would be less threatening. Linda.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Actually, when you're talking about it, I don't know if any of you are teaching in person or online, but all of my teaching is in person because it's not safe for us to be out together where I live.
You mean online?
Online. We get together online instead of in person right now. And a way that you can do the think, pair, share is if you're working with adults on Zoom, for example, you could do the breakout rooms. And I've been experimenting with breakout rooms for a couple of months now with my Sunday Nature Journaling Club. And we break out after we come back from nature journaling. Everyone comes back. And then we split up into groups of 3 or 4. And then what I wanted was everyone to have a voice and to everyone be heard and share if they wanted to, because it's hard when you have 30, 40, 50 people and, you know, allowing sharing going on. So having these small groups, and I like the think, pair, share, and I'm thinking maybe even just having 2 people might take the pressure off of, you know, anyone who's feeling a little apprehensive. I think adults tend to be maybe more likely to be fearful of sharing their work than maybe children would be. So maybe creating more of that safe time so that they can do the think, pair, share. And then I like asking the question at the end to just, or maybe ahead of time, you know, asking them to look for a strategy that they would like to use in their own journal. And that way, in the big room when everyone comes back together, then the discussion could be about like, what was something cool you saw in your partner's journal? And I think that that would be a really great way to help people look at another's journal page and not just say it's a pretty picture, because we've all been trained in our world, right, that we get approval by making a pretty picture. But we say in nature journaling that it's not about the pretty picture, but if the only comment, the feedback that we know how to give is, oh, it's so beautiful, you're so talented, then it doesn't help to push that idea forward that it's not about the picture. It really is about the experience. And so as I see myself as a mentor, helping people see nature in a different way and recording that in the journal. So, you know, as nature journaling teachers, how can we do more of that? How can we help people critique each other in a way that's helpful? And as Jack has always said, you know, feed forward, right? Giving, instead of like feedback, like in the moment, what do you see on this page that's, you know, that they're doing right? Like, what are they noticing, and what are they wondering about? And what do you notice and wonder from looking through their page? So using that I notice, I wonder a second time through the lens of viewing your partner's page, I think is just a really fabulous way of training people to look at other people's pages. And I don't want to use the word critique, because that makes it feel like it's, you know, art that we're, you know, giving a grade, but just evaluating and harvesting in someone else's page, something that you want to put in your garden, in your nature journal garden, so to speak. And maybe it's something that you've learned a long time ago, but you put in your toolbox instead of in your tool belt. So in that moment, the person you paired up with is using that tool. It's in their tool belt, and you think, hey, maybe this is what I can use today. Because, you know, there are so many wonderful tools and strategies that we're not all going to remember everything. And it just is a cycle. Sometimes you're going to be really on top of certain things, and then you don't use them for a while and something new comes. So just understanding that your nature journaling is dynamic, and that there is no expert in nature journaling. Like, you are the expert of looking at nature through your eyes and your experience. But that when you share your page, that you're enriching everyone else's experience. So I think I want to go back to the question about how does good mentoring look like? And I think, going back to Katya, it is about just doing it yourself, right? Lead through example. Learn as much as you can. Read Jack's books. Go get How to Teach Nature Journaling if you didn't already get one. The free PDF download is awesome, and the hard copy is even better, because you can put Post-it notes and dog ear and put notes in it. And then you don't, because I printed a few pages before the book was available, and it's a big mess. There's papers all over the place. So, you know, I invested in that copy, and it is such an amazing resource. So I just want to put a plug in there, you know, because Jack might not say, but I really think that that is a good place to start. He and Emily have done so much work on it to make it easy for us as educators to bring a little bit of a new activity maybe we haven't tried before, and do it ourselves, and do it with the people that we teach, and to come with beginner's mind, right? Just because we're teachers doesn't mean we have to know everything. A good teacher is someone who knows there's always something to learn. So if you can come to the table with, I am here to learn, and someone who's new at nature journaling can teach me something if I keep that attitude. So yeah, I went all over with it, but just modeling, right? So keep learning yourselves. You keep learning, you keep expanding, keep noticing nature in ways and stretching yourself to try new techniques and strategies, because that's how you're going to expand your toolkit, and that's how you're going to build more confidence and be at ease at what you're doing, right? And it just takes practice. You know, giving feedback is hard at first, but by watching Jack, right? If you come to Jack's Tuesday, Thursday, you'll see him doing that with the people who share their nature journal pages. Just you know, watch and listen and learn from what he is saying. Although a lot of times it's about art because we're drawing, right, in those classes, but, you know, just be attentive to how people are giving feedback, and then, you know, put that into your tool belt.
Thank you. Also, about the books, if there's anybody who's watching this and you need the book and you can't afford it, just send me a private confidential email and we'll hook you up. I can get you the materials that you need. And if the cost of the book, if you've got the PDF and you really do need a hard copy, but it's too expensive, we can take care of that. So we got you back. Hey, Billy Joe, I saw a number of comments from you that were really germane and useful. I was wondering if you felt comfortable sharing those with the group in conversation. Looks
Sure.
like that'd be great.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Billy Joe. I'm up from Canada, and I just started nature journaling this year, and I've become a little bit obsessed. And so it's been really great. I actually was just on a meeting today with another teacher. She's a grade 1-2 French immersion teacher, and I was like, "You need to be nature journaling. That's exactly what you need to be doing." And so a couple of things that I found that really works. So I'm an outdoor educator with the board, and we are at this point due to COVID, we are also not able to go into the classrooms. So we are doing everything virtually. So I've always set them up to get a piece of nature before the lesson that I'm teaching. So especially if they're doing online, and in order to make it equitable, not everybody has access to a green space. So like Jack has said in the past, I go and get a piece of fruit or vegetable from the fridge, a house plant, a leaf from outside, any of those kinds of things. And then I show up with my own piece of nature as well. And then I usually start with the younger grades. I don't actually get them to write. We just do it verbally. And then the teacher gives them time to do the writing afterwards so that we can have a really dynamic and interesting conversation, especially with K. And so the idea is, you know, this is what we're doing. This is how scientists use it. So I really kind of go through all those pieces that Jack has used in a lot of his webinar videos, as well as the book. And then I model it. So I say, I notice, and I hold up my piece of nature and I go through the things that I notice about it. And then because they're online, especially for Ks, there's an adult somewhere in that vicinity. So I say, with your adults, please go ahead and do like a little bit of a pair share, but the things that you notice about your piece of nature. And so I give them, you know, a little bit of time to do that. And then I do the same thing where I ask whether or not they're willing to share. And most of them are just jumping up and down in order to want to share what they've sort of done. And then we go through I wonder, and we go through the it reminds me of. With the older grades, I am giving them some time to draw. And then at the end, we go through and we say, if you want to share your full sheet, would you like to share your journal entry? And that's where the one time I did it with the older grades was amazing, in that nobody was commenting on each other's pictures, but they were commenting how they had organized their journal entries, because I always make it very apparent that it's not about a pretty picture. They can trace it. I've said that to them as well, like, please go ahead and trace it. And it's really, I said, you know, it's similar to you're drawing the picture so that you can really remember what it looks like. So I said, it's not about it being pretty, but it's about using your arrows and really getting in those features so that you remember what it looks like. And so then there was a whole conversation about, like, well, this is how I organized my I wonder questions. I used a big question mark, and someone said, well, I drew a box around mine. And then someone said, oh, I used a big question mark as well. And then next thing you know, I'm just sitting there as the facilitator watching this all unfold in front of me, which was beautiful, really, right? Because that's really what it was about. And then usually at the end, because I'm only with them for such a short period of time, I try to come back to some of their I wonder questions and either get to see if some of the students may know the answers to each other's I wonder questions, or if it's a situation where we can encourage more questioning to be done. And then for the teachers, whether or not some of those I wonder questions can be pulled out into an inquiry project for each individual student, or for the class where answers can be put into a journal, or it's a new entry, or, you know, all these sorts of different things. So I've been trying to get the message across really that it is cross-curricular, and that it doesn't matter the age and it doesn't matter the ability, that this is something that can be used over time. I had another class, I gave them a challenge, a temperature challenge. And so every week they were to go out and take the temperature. But because of the grade that they're in, grade 1s and 2s, they're also doing seasonal changes. So I had them add into their piece. So again, if you're a teacher that's looking to sort of create a rubric, what would they be wearing on that day? So I tried to build a little bit of that scaffolding into things I wanted to see in that nature journal. So what was the temperature, but what did the sky look like? And does the sky have anything, a correlation to do with the temperature, you know, and all these sorts of different things. And then the teacher just kind of went with it. So I'm excited to see in about a week sort of how that all rolls out. So that's sort of how I've been doing it, by modeling, and then trying to do some think, pair, share. And then for obviously the in-person classes, that's what I've said is the same that Jack mentioned earlier, was in-person buddy system, think, pair, share, which I think works really well, especially for the kids who are a little bit shy, but actually have some of the most amazing, you know, in-depth things to share. And it's not always just the kid who's a big talker that's got things to share. So it's been really beautiful, and I've really enjoyed it. So I hope that's what you were asking me to share. Okay.
Billy Joe, we're really, really excited to have you as part of this community. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be a part of it.
Tell us a little bit more about what you do with the real, I know there are a number of people here who are working with those young kinder people, and what you find most successful as a strategy for engaging them.
Yeah, so really, I personally find that kinders are really engaged if they have something in their hands. So having that piece of nature in their hand, and then knowing that there's prep, right? So they had to get this before their big meeting with me. So there's some prep into that. There's some anticipation about what we're going to do with that. And I find that they're just really excited to share. And so if I model it as like, these are the things that I'm noticing about my piece of nature, generally speaking, I find that young kids want to share what they've done as well. And I think for me, I've also noticed I can watch some cues, right? And then I sometimes pose questions to them as well. So I had a little girl who had a piece of long like wheat-like grass the other day, and I seen her making like a mustache with it and all this kind of stuff that she didn't realize that everybody could see. And so I said to her, you know, and she said, well, it's very fluffy. And I said, yes, it is very fluffy. And I said, it reminds me of a mustache. And I said, I've seen you doing that. And then they get excited that I've picked up on something that they've done, and it's exciting, or sort of engaging in maybe an extra question, or maybe an I wonder that I have about their piece. You know, a kid had literally a baseball-sized radish one day, and I was like, that's the biggest radish I've ever seen. So really engaging and getting them to understand that I'm not just there, but I'm like part of the class. And so I'm immersed, even if I'm from a virtual place, that I'm part of their class, and I'm just as excited about the things that they're holding as they are. And I don't, maybe that's just part of me being me as well, is that I get pretty excited about things very easily. But I found that that's been really awesome. And then hopefully being able to check in back with them as well has been really quite nice.
So what's really interesting, we've been talking about sort of what does good mentoring look like. I think that what we're hearing from Billy Joe, that sounds like really good mentoring. She's wanting people to do, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and how is she engaging with the kids? She is, as people were saying, you want to model it. She's doing, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and then they're giving her back more, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and then they get in a discussion doing, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, they hold up their things, she's doing, I notices and I wonders and it reminds me of with the things with them. I'm
going to interrupt in a minute. I'm just going to say something, which is like you, Jack, she's also modeling enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Because it's infectious. And attitude is something that you can model for the kids. for your students.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I come by that very easily.
It's great.
Thank you. I also let them know that I do it on my own as well, that it's my own practice. And usually when I'm doing with the kids, I will sometimes just have a sheet of paper. And I know Jack has said in the past, just use a whiteboard. And so sometimes I'll do that just to get them started. But then while I'm giving them time to do it, I'm also taking a few minutes to draw the picture out quickly, write in a few things so that I can say, hey, this is what I did in my journal entry, even though I'm sitting at home, sort of thing. So again, that enthusiasm, I think you get a lot of buy-in with that.
That is, you know, if I've mentioned this in some other context, like if when the class is doing free reading, if the teacher is grading their math tests at that point, it sends a really clear message about the importance of reading a book. If when they're reading, the teacher gets lost in a book and has to set a timer, otherwise they'll be reading for the next 3 hours. You know, then that really shows, oh, this is real, this is important. And so too with nature journaling. If you are, you know, we're all visible to each other on journaling. If when they're journaling, you're doing this.
Just waiting.
Yeah. Then, yeah, this is something for you to do. This isn't something for me to do. But if instead, you know, they see you, you know, and you've got your, you know, that's a different kettle of fish. Hey, Katya, could you tell us a little bit about the KWL chart?
Okay. When Billy Jo was talking, she reminded me of something that we used to do, which was that when we'd introduce a topic, for example, caterpillars. I noticed these beautiful caterpillars in the garden where I'm teaching a little pot of kids. And so I would ask them first, what do you know about caterpillars? And then I would ask them, what do you want to know about caterpillars? And then after we studied it, we looked at it, maybe we observed it for a little while, or we, you know, maybe did some research online or looked in a book, then we would come back with, what did we learn?
Yeah, getting that sort of sort of what is your prior knowledge, and how has your thinking about this changed on a very explicit meta level, encountering those things. That was how long ago were you're doing this? Because I'm curious if this is a new.
As recently as what, is 2 years ago?
Okay.
A year and a half years ago?
Yeah, because it's in you know, recently in education, people have found it exactly what Katya is talking about here, is that it's really important to kind of get into, like, what is our prior knowledge of this, and that's also prior knowledge. How does it come in on this nature journaling? That's also, like, it reminds me of is a great place for harvesting all your prior knowledge about this sort of stuff. It reminds me of this stuff that I was learning about this and 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 this. And it also it reminds me of, can be all these sort of very, you know, non-linear things as well. But you want to assess your prior knowledge, and then you also want to identify explicitly how has your thinking changed because of doing this. Otherwise, what happens is the stuff that is already in your head takes up all the mental space, and any kind of new idea that is trying to get in here to kind of change things, it gets bounced out, because the stuff that's in here already goes like, no, look, I'm prior knowledge. I've already got myself established on these neurons, and I'm not going anywhere, pal. So you try to kind of get some new information in there, the prior knowledge, we'll go like, you know, I'm going to have to change a schema in order to accommodate you, so it's not going to happen, because that's going to take work. But if you're explicit about what that prior knowledge is, and then as you're learning things, you can see that actually that's different than what I thought before. That's interesting. And then you're
and that's also, sorry, I was going to say, that's also something that I would model, because sometimes I would say, you know, when I was your age, I used to think this, But then I learned so many new things, and, you know, and I might share with them something I learned, but I try to show them that we can change our thinking, we can change our knowledge, we can add to it. But that is something that I used to interject.
Yeah. And then at the end, you're kind of really reflecting on it. Metacognition. You're thinking about your thinking, and you're being explicit. I thought this, then this happened, and now I think this. If we can do that, we actually have a fighting chance of changing our minds in the presence of evidence. That's the real big task here. The more that we look at confirmation bias and all of the cognitive biases and the logical fallacies that happen to our human brains so easily, it's not like we get exposed to new information and then we update our priors, right? We're not Bayesian reasoning machines. The stuff that is in our heads is there, and we don't let go of any of our delusions willingly. They have to be pried from our cold, dead fingers. And it takes work, it takes energy. And noticing what the prior information is, being aware when there's something that is different, and kind of going like, this is different, and on the backside of it saying, and I used to think this, and then this, and now I think that, is really, really huge. So the stuff that Katya is doing there is really sophisticated tools for changing the shape of your brain.
I'm always seeking to change the shape of my brain, so it's easy to model it.
And so say that again, because what Katya just said is actually a real important thought. So hit us with that again.
I'm always interested in changing the shape of my brain.
Right. So if what you're interested in is being right, then things that would change the shape of your brain are a threat, because the things that can change your brain the most are things where you're wrong, right? And by the way, all of us are wrong about a ton of stuff, right? So if we're interested in changing, and you get some new information, instead of going like, oh, that's really challenging to my worldview, I'm not even going to go there, right? I'm going to find reasons why I am either going to disrespect you, or I can discount the information that is coming in here. That is the go-to approach of the human mind. But what Katya is talking about is her identity is not around, she didn't say about being correct, about being right. The identity is around changing in the presence of evidence. And so if you start thinking like, what is the last time I changed my mind about something of significance?
Right. One other thing that I modeled for my kids is that, because this was in a classroom, and so I would model like whatever they were doing. And I might have something in my journal where I deliberately misdid something that we all knew. Maybe it was drawing a picture and having too many eyes, or putting the eyes on the top of the head, so that the kids could go, wait a minute, it doesn't go there. And I would be like, oh, you're right. And just thanking them for pointing out that I'm not always right. So, because that's also part of the discussion, is that I was trying to create a safe space for them to say, you know, wait a minute, that's not that.
So something interesting happened to me sort of along that same line is I thought, so like I said, nature journaling is new to me this year. And so I'm like an okay artist, but I wouldn't say that I'm an expert by any means. And I finally sort of built up the courage to take a couple pictures of my journal entries and put them out onto Twitter to share with my schools to try and, you know, get them excited. And then realized that I completely had some spelling errors, and not just like small ones, like massive big bubble letters, spelling errors. And I thought, oh, and then it just proved, I was like, well, I guess I was just too immersed in what I was doing to worry about spelling northern, for instance. And so that's a great piece to just be humble about it. And yes, we all make mistakes and it's totally fine. And, I put it right out onto the Twitter world.
Yeah. And for me as a dyslexic, I use my spelling mistakes actually as a tool to try to get students to lighten up and be willing to kind of make mistakes in their journal. In addition to being a great way of kind of introducing or engaging in a conversation with other students who have learning challenges. It's great to have your journal be a place where mistakes are made, right? It's not this presentation piece. But making big bubble letters in a title is great. It's a great activity to do because it makes you think about like what is the overall overarching concept on this page. That's why it's useful, not because it's spelled right. So the spelling, I want to be explicit with the students. You can spell this a bunch of different ways. You can write this in whatever language comes the most easy to you, right? And you can misspell that as well. Your drawings don't have to be pretty drawings. We want your words, we want your pictures, we want your numbers. We want your thinking, and we're not interested in the performance of the drawing skill, or of the, like, if I don't know how to say if I'm trying to use a word in my page, I'm thinking like I'm not sure how to spell it, so I'm going to just avoid writing that note. I have just, the journal is my brain on paper. I have just trimmed my brain. So. I'd like to return to Ashley, if she's available, to see if we've answered her questions. Looks like she's currently occupied. So it is now here on the west coast of California here. It is time for lunch. And I want to thank the educators who have joined us for this discussion, for sharing your ideas. It really gets rich and really gets interesting as we start to drop in these pieces of experience from everyone. Every Wednesday, we have our Nature Journal Educator Forum. And this is the way that it goes. So if you're new to this, we all get together and we take some topic and we chew on it for a little while, and then we take notes furiously, and it starts to, we're kind of developing the vocabulary for discussing these things, for engaging with the problems that we have, for discussing these things with our school boards, with our parents, with our peers, with other educators. It also, we're trying to figure out what are the best practices that we can develop. And thank you folks so much for being here. Before we close, Arpan or Ray Bonto have a journal page here to show. And Arpan, you are live here.
No, this is not my work. So whatever he's been listening, so he made a page out of it. So I just wanted to share it. That's it.
Don't blame me. It's his fault. He wanted to.
I love it. So what you're looking at here is, this is metacognition. This is as we're going. This is that's Ray Bonto. Good to see you there. Ray Bonto has been sketchnoting these ideas and putting them down on paper, and we have. This is a really useful way to learn. this is terrific sketchnoting. Thank you so much for sharing that, Ray Banta.
Thank you.
Ray Banta, were you able to get to the workshop on sketchnoting from Mike Rohde?
Yeah, I did, but not the next one. I did the first one.
Yeah, he did not attend the
Keynote.
talk. He had the keynote talk, but I
Okay.
did. Yeah. But,
Yeah.
And thanks for doing wolves tomorrow.
Oh, he's looking forward to the wolves tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, the reason we're doing wolves tomorrow, Ray Banto, is because of you. You made a special request for wolves. So I got in touch with the Wolf Conservation Center, and we're going to do some stuff with wolf anatomy. There's a handout that you can download, and some stuff on drawing wolves. And then we'll go over to some live wolf cams and do some nature journaling with live wolves on their video feed. So that will be a lot of fun. Thank you so much for the suggestion of the workshop, and also the Kwl workshop was a hoot too. My friends, thank you all so much for joining us today. I hope that this was a useful workshop to you, and I look forward to Ashley, did you did you get some strategies that worked for you? I think we've got no video connection there. All right. I hope this was useful for everybody here. Again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It was I've got some notes. I've got 3 pages of notes now to sit back and review. And so I'm going to, in the first 18 minutes, I'm going to review it all. And
Jack,
what happens? Yep.
It's Joe Coho.
Oh, Joe, good to hear from you.
I just wanted to put in one addendum. I was listening to all this, and it occurs to me that along the lines of, if you want kids to think that it's okay to have their own opinions, sometimes you have to let them win, even if they're wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, does that make sense? Otherwise, it's like, oh, well, I guess I'm wrong, so my opinion doesn't count. It's just this thing that I sort of noticed about kids, that they're perfectly willing to shut up and defer to the fact that they were wrong, and that somebody else is telling them. But sometimes, even in a power struggle, it's important to let them win just for the sake of reinforcing that they can win. I don't know. That's my thought.
I think we've just opened up a whole big can of worms here. Oh boy. Okay. Let's jump over to Katya and then Valerie.
Hi. I think that there are ways to accept and process what somebody said, even if it's not correct. Like, I like how you got to that. I like your thinking. I like how you added 2 and 2, even though you got to 3. I like what you did to get to that. But I don't know that, I'm not quite sure. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you mean, but I think that you can acknowledge what's right about something, because almost everything has something right about it. And I think that might be because that's with changing how you think. It's that if everything is right or wrong, then you are either right or wrong. But that's not how the world works. And I think that we're happier individuals and a happier society when we can see that there's a whole spectrum. And so saying that this is really interesting what you said, but, I like how you got here. I think that's important to say, that your thinking is really good. You may not have gotten to the right answer, but how you got there is important. And I think that's what I'm getting from what you said.
So
Okay,
you're,
if I can jump back in for just a second.
yes,
I agree with you, Katja, or is this Katja?
Gotcha. Yes, you got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
I agree with you, but I think there's 2 points. One is, I think kids are much more emotionally tuned than adults, and if there's any hint of condensation in saying, "Oh yeah, that's good," I can see, you know, the condensation will ruin it. And I think I think, you know, honestly, I'm basing this not only on my experience in working with kids as a naturalist, but also in my own personal life. You know, when I got into a power struggle, I was willing to shut up, but it didn't make me feel very good. And so somehow the teacher has to do what he or she is doing without turning it into a power struggle. Now I'll stop.
Okay, in my own experience, I've never turned it into, or tried not to turn it into a power struggle. And I try not to speak down to my students, even though they're 5. I try not to speak down to them. And I feel like I might be sounding that way right now, but I think it's how you approach things. And I generally was interested in how kids got to their answers.
And so I want to make it perfectly clear that I'm probably not talking to anybody in this group, because the people who are attracted to this group, I think, don't do that. But there are teachers that do that. And it was just a suggestion, just a point of view on this whole process.
thank you, Joe and Katja. Valerie.
Yeah, this may be redundant, but from what other folks were saying, but I work primarily with adults now, and this works with kids too. But let's just say, you know, they're confusing different birds. You know, they're looking at a downy woodpecker and they're calling it a pileated woodpecker. And you know, at that point, it's really about what's important here. Is it important that they get the bird ID spot on, or is it important that they enjoy the bird and journal the bird? And so when they, like, if I'm with somebody that misidentifies a bird or a flower or whatever, what I do is I identify a characteristic of that creature that is just gorgeous. Like, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, you know, woodpeckers are so cool because this is, you know, look at how he's working on that tree and he's going after bugs and doo-dah. So this other person who maybe has misidentified the bird feels that I'm supporting them, I'm not correcting them. That's not my job. My job is to engage them with nature. If they want to discuss ID further, we can do that. Or maybe they'll figure it out on their own when they go back and review their nature journal. But I find by supporting people and say, oh man, that bird is so awesome, even though I know that they're misidentifying it, it doesn't make any difference. Become enthused and engaged and appreciate whatever it is they happen to be looking at.
Can I jump in for a second?
Absolutely, Rebecca.
I think it's also important to talk about how our knowledge is formed. And so if there are facts that are already established that we know that we might have read in a book, well, how did the book know it? Or how did the scientists know it? You know, the knowledge, the facts that we already have, where did those come from? And to talk about how they came from the same processes that we're using in the nature journals and the and asking questions and field notes and observations and experiments, and that what the kids are learning is what they're doing, like they're actively engaging in that same process. And even if they are wrong, well, there sometimes could be a chance that they're right, and maybe there are facts that are thought to be true, but maybe aren't always true.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can I chime in as well, just really quickly? I was said in the chat that I find that if I pose a question, so maybe it's with a kindergarten class, or say, and and it's, you know, hibernation, like what is hibernation or something like that. And hibernation is a big word for kindergarten. Some know and some don't. And so maybe they give all these different answers, right? And I'll say, okay, that's good. Maybe that could be a part of it. And then I just keep asking questions. So I always find that my role is to be a question asker and for them to provide the answers. And we ask as many questions that it takes to sort of facilitate our way through it so that nobody feels like their answer has been shut down, because it's part of the puzzle piece. If we ask the question, why did the leaves fall off in the fall here in Ontario? You know, well, someone says, well, because it's fall. Well, yes, that's part of it. Well, someone says because it's windy. Yes, that's part of it. You know, am I looking to say, well, it's because they're hibernating and photosynthesis is depleting, and like I'm not really looking for that, right? I'm looking for them to gather as much information as possible to come to a general consensus for their age level on what that answer is, and all of them are providing that information to just my one question. And so it's not so much telling whether or not you're right or wrong, but it's guiding them to a place. And sometimes you can watch them process your questions and go, oh, maybe what I first said maybe doesn't make sense, because now you've asked me all these other questions and now it's made me think that, you know, oh, maybe this is the right answer. And then sometimes I don't know, right? So sometimes I just don't know. And I'm like, we should probably look this up together. Or some kid will come and be like, tell me something. I'll be like, I have no idea. And so like, let's look it up together. So always giving them a platform to be able to be as creative and be as opinionated as they want, to never shut it down, but to always add it to a piece of the pile. And so I always try to come back to some of those maybe more obscure pieces and say, yes, this is where that starts to fit into that greater puzzle piece of what that sort of answer is a way that I sometimes find works really well, instead of just saying, yes, that's the answer, or no, that's the wrong answer, because it's all part of it. There's more than one answer to a question, if that makes any sense.
That does. You know, I think that what we've at the end of our of a wonderful conversation that we had about kind of dealing with people in different levels, we have opened up a new excellent topic about discourse. Yeah. And I think that this should be the topic for one of our next educator workshops, because there's so much beautiful stuff to unpack here. A few things to think about is when you, the next generation science standards, one of the science and engineering practices that they say is critical for students to develop is the idea of making arguments from evidence. And they're using the word arguments here not in the colloquial way of like, so what they're trying to do is to get people to engage in discourse around ideas. And discourse is different than debates. In discourse, there actually isn't a winner and a loser. The purpose of the discourse is to change and tweak your thinking. And if your thinking doesn't change, okay, great. If your thinking does change, great. It's actually not a situation where there's a win or a loss. So if you're doing something with a kid and you're thinking maybe I should let the kid win, then that also should be a big light bulb for you of, I'm not doing discourse, I'm doing debate. And debate, winning and losing, is not an effective way of changing the mental schemas that we have. When you lose a debate, you just feel, And there's actually some evidence for this backfire effect, that when you are faced with evidence in a debate against your position, sometimes people just double down more, because especially if part of their identity is wrapped around whatever idea that they're looking at. So I would say, rather than thinking about, if you are in a win-lose situation with students in your group, then I think that that's also a really good time to notice that and to institute some changes about how you handle discussions, because you're probably then doing debate rather than discourse. And one of the strategies that I find that students will have lots of misperceptions about things. Adults have lots of misperceptions about things. Humans have lots of misperceptions about things. And so what we want to do is to develop strategies of using discourse as a tool, where the discourse gets in there and plays around in these things and roots them out, and we come out the other end changed, not having won or lost. But we come out, as Katya was saying, we come out changed. And I think that that is the real goal. So what was being saying earlier about it's important to think about how knowledge is formed. How do human beings form the schemas? How do we form our ideas? How do we connect personal, emotional significance to thoughts or ideas that we have? That's what you see a lot of in the political discussion. People's identity gets locked onto an idea. The idea is threatened by talking with somebody, and then the whole thing tanks because it's now about the conversation becomes a threat. So how do you back yourself out of that? How do you create a situation where you are open to change? You yourself are open to change. And so in interacting with my two daughters, what Joe Coho was talking about a moment ago about, maybe I can sort of rephrase it, not so much let them win, but let them see how things that they are bringing up in the discussion can influence and change how you think about things. So it's not a win or lose, but you want to be role modeling that you're changing in the presence of evidence.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, it's just a slightly different way of framing that, but I think it is very useful. And one of the things that I think one of the most useful questions that we can have as we're sort of talking to students about these things, you'll hear adults and kids say things that are, no, it's wrong. And this is something I've taught my kids to say, and they do it to me. And I just found out that Amelia did this to one of her teachers in class too. The question is, oh, that's really interesting. What's the evidence for that? Right? That's interesting. What's the evidence for that? Right? So you're not just saying, smack down on that idea. That's really interesting. What's the evidence for that? And if there isn't evidence, that tells you a lot. If there is, then you can evaluate claims based on their evidence. And then what we do in science is nobody cares what scientists believe. Scientists believe that, no one cares. What it is scientists will accept or reject an idea. If they're doing science right, they'll accept or reject an idea to the degree that the evidence supports or does not support that idea. So all ideas are on, and all explanations then are on a slider of evidence. And when the evidence is stronger, we are more accepting of that idea. And as the evidence becomes weaker, we are less so. When there's evidence to the contrary, we go the opposite direction. So we can say a lot about this world. And the reason is because we're making arguments from evidence. And so I would say, let kids see where your ideas change in the presence of evidence. Let your ideas be open to change in discourse with adults and with kids. And when that happens, it's not a weakness, it's something to celebrate. So for me, for a number of years now, I've tried to cultivate, and it actually is harder than you'd think, the idea that my identity is not based around a specific claim, but being willing to change my opinion in the presence of evidence. And so I'm now constantly on the hunt, on the lookout for things that I can change my opinion about, because I know that a lot of the things that I think are wrong. And so when people say things that challenges things that I think, I go, instead of like, stop it, or I've got to beat you, I go, oh, goody, maybe this will be the next opportunity for me to change my opinions about things. And this goes for social things, personal political things, scientific things. I'm looking to change my mind in the presence of evidence. And as a result of that, I now can point to a bunch of different things where I used to believe this, and then this evidence, and now I believe this. And the more of those that I can stack up, the more I feel comfortable in this idea, in this place of being able to change my mind in the presence of evidence. And I think that is another way of maybe sort of framing what you were talking about, Joe, is that we want to show the students that they have that ability to affect us. And it also, but it doesn't have to be about winning or losing. Wow, we are a whole half hour over our time slot here. So I think that epistemology and arguments from evidence would be a wonderful topic for an upcoming discussion. And I would love to go there with this community, and I think we can have a lot of fun in it. Thank you, folks, so much for your contributions to this discussion and this community. Together, we're figuring out what these best practices look like. And the more that we intentionally encounter and discuss and wrap these if we in this community, as we're discussing ideas, if we all come to it sort of excited about the idea of getting some of our ideas to change in the presence of evidence, we're going to have really fun, productive times. A little bit of homework between now and the next time we meet. I would like you to take a look at the next generation science standards. Even if you're a homeschool teacher, check out the next generation science standards. Particularly look at something called the science and engineering practices, and their description of the one called making arguments from evidence. And in our next discussion, we'll do that. You also might do some other searches for, here's my challenge to the community. You guys now know we are going to be discussing making arguments from evidence. We're going to be talking about epistemology. How is it that we kind of know what we know? We're going to be talking about the role of evidence in decision making. We're going to be talking about how we change our minds. And we're going to be talking about what gets us stuck in ruts, why we believe things that are not true, and what are our best practices for kind of getting ourselves out of the, given that that is the human condition, to deal with it. If you can find any journal articles or opinion pieces that bear on this topic, read through those, and if there's anything that is really relevant, shoot it to me in an email. Just say like, Jack, check this out. And I would love to have that be, we're going to have a very interesting discussion. And I think it'll be a lot of fun. All right, my friends. Until next time, this is your Nature Journal Educators Workshop. Thank you all for being here. Again, I'm so grateful to this community. Maybe before we close out, Joe, I want to make sure that you've, just to circle back with you and your thoughts about how we're addressing those ideas, if you feel comfortable talking about that.
Oh, of course. Of course. I feel very well heard. And that is so cool about this group. And you've refined already what I mean when I say you have to let them win. It's the actual point I was trying to make became clear to me, which is you want them to feel like they're an equal on this playground.
Yeah.
And right. This group is so wonderful.
It is a beautiful community, Joe. It's an absolutely beautiful community. And we are equals on this playground. You know, we embrace the absurdity of the human condition, and we do our best within those constraints. And there's a lot of wonderful, beautiful things that we can do. And again, thank you so much for all of the experience and educator minds who contributed to our discourse here. Until next time, my friends, I will see you soon.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Billy
Thanks,
Joe,
everyone.
great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I look forward to next Wednesday. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Good times.
Welcome.
Good times.